Welcome to this wonderful Seat at the Table, another episode, but this wonderful episode focuses on African American or Black History Month, and we are pleased to have with us members who are going to share with us a little bit about Black History Month and how it relates to us here in this location of Phoenix. It's a true blessing to have in our presence someone who has been with us for now, how many years? You said 40 plus? 47 years. Reverend Dr. Warren Stewart, Sr., from the First Institutional Baptist Church in Phoenix. We're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Greetings.
Thank you. And then a newcomer, someone who's been with us just maybe a little over a year, yes. Reverend Dr. Tony Hawkins, and a good friend of mine now, the Transitional Conference Minister for the Southwestern Conference for the United Church of Christ. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And a good friend, a long-time member now of the Diocese of Phoenix, Father Andrew McNair, the Director of Black Catholic Ministry for the Diocese of Phoenix, and the pastor at St. Josephine Bakita Mission Parish in Phoenix, just not too far away from here as well. But we're happy to have you here, and I just wanted to kind of give a little quick intro to Black History Month. It just starts with Carter Woodson, 1926, and he was really the father of Black History Month with the Black History Week, which coincided with the birthdays of President Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. So it expanded, in essence, over these many years, and we're almost ready to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Black History recognition, because that was established in 1926. But what I wanted to ask you, and maybe this is like an intro for each of us here at the table, what are some of the ways in which you celebrate Black History Month, particularly within your own congregations? Maybe Dr. Tony, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Well, there are various ways in which we celebrate. I just preached at one of our churches this Sunday, the Church of the Beatitudes, and there was no mention of Black History Month. So sometimes you have to create an awareness of Black history. So when I recognized, because we had the beads for Mardi Gras, but I had to also remind them that not only is this Transfiguration Sunday, and Valentine's Day is coming up, but we are also in Black History Month. So I think sometimes it's just creating awareness where there is none.
Mm-hmm. That's. How about you, Dr. Warren?
Well, we celebrate the entire month, and each Sunday we celebrate a different aspect of African American heritage and history. Now, the second Sunday is what is our African American Heritage Sunday, and we have African music. Our praise team sang a song from Burundi, the first song, and then another song was a modern version of We Shall Overcome and Lift Every Voice and Sing. And we encourage our members to wear African attire if they so desire.
Oh, yes, nice. I love that. That's right. And Father Andrew, you were sharing a little bit about what you had been doing, but tell us with how have you been celebrating this this year or in the past?
Well, what my office is doing is encouraging people to study and learn their history and the contributions that we've made to this country. And I just want to share, if I may, my favorite resource during Black History Month. And this is a comprehensive account of Black history. And it's broken up into 10 units. And it's extremely well done. I don't know if they can see.
I don't know which. We'll point it to a camera. Point it up there.
So
there we go.
How about that?
Perfect.
But I'm encouraging my parishioners, to study this book, and it's filled with QR codes. So if you wanted to go deeper in whatever theme, it's all here. You can do that. So, I purchased this at the Black Catholic Congress in Washington this past summer, and when I saw this book, I says, had not planned on or budgeted to buy this book, but I said, well, you know how they got something to get your money. I said, well, I'm going to get it, and I'm going to.
Well, that looks expensive.
Well, it's a treasure that I want and love and have, so I think it's well worth it. And also we're celebrating this month, we're developing a historical video series of how the Black Catholic community emerged here in Phoenix. And it goes back to 1932. So there's a long history there. Many people know nothing about it, but we want to raise awareness, something that people can see and read and learn. And finally, I'm encouraging families to learn something historical about their own families, something about their own family. And if I may, Bishop, I'd like to share something about my family that I have recently learned through African Ancestry, which is a group of scientists that specialize in finding, our background. I recently learned that my family comes from Ghana.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
And it was a 100% match.
Wow.
And I said, well, praise God. So I'm connecting with a few priests from Ghana, and my father has already been there. He went when he was 80 years old, before we knew all of this.
Wow.
And so knowing where my family comes from, there's a connection to the motherland.
Yeah.
And I think people, trying to find out something about their own family, their own background, is impactful.
Well, I remember when I was a kid, some of you might be old enough to remember Roots, but when that came out, that was like a new American phenomenon. It went stretched beyond the Black community because everyone wanted to find their roots. I all of a sudden started to look at my Irish roots, and and I think because of that, in some ways, that kind of helped propel many cultures to kind of celebrate their own histories. And what was unique, I think, to the Black community here in the United States was what was the history certainly after the slavery movement. What was the history since that time? And I think that's great to have that book. But I'm wondering maybe just what's important to have. Why is it so important to have a month-long Black History Month, and why is that so important, particularly for our community here in Phoenix? Maybe.
Well, because of the low percentage of African Americans in Arizona, and the majority of African Americans who live in Arizona live in the Valley, so it's very important to remind our children, our families, people of the contributions of African Americans to this nation, as well as to Arizona. There have been significant contributions here in the state of Arizona. And so in a place like Arizona, it's very important because if not, you can lose your sense of culture, use your sense of identity, because you don't see a lot of people that look like you. If you come here from Louisville, as Dr. Tony does, or from Chicago or someplace, or from North Carolina, I mean, Black people are everywhere.
Right.
But here, that's not the case. And so that's why it's very important, I believe, here.
Yeah, when I arrived, I was quite surprised. In the state of California, the African American community is only 5%, which is shocking to me. I would have guessed a lot more because of Oakland or L.A. or so, but it only represents 5% total. Right. So I was quite amazed. And then when I came here, Father Andrew, you shared that the number of just Black Catholics is sizable, but they were underrepresented within our Catholic enterprise for so many, many years. That's just a very fascinating reality. Maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, when I arrived here, I thought there were just so few, particularly Black Catholics. But, through our records, I come to learn that we have around 60,000 throughout the state. And I think the fact that There wasn't an intentional program of evangelization. Many people drifted from the faith and the practice of the faith, unfortunately. So what I'm trying to do is re-engage. And because all these, families that I meet, especially the older people, they all have children and grandchildren. He says, well, why aren't they in church? So I see these people at funerals and weddings.
Sure.
So, and that really is a moment of evangelization, particularly when you haven't seen people in church for so long
Sure.
and reach out to them.
Right. You're being the new kid on the block. What do you see here? Coming from a very different
Yes, it's quite different being here. I would say one of the things that helps our community is just creating an awareness every day, and that not focusing so much on 1 month. 1 month is needed just to highlight our history, but I think also it's important that we create that awareness every day, and one of the ways in which I do that, serving in a predominantly white faith tradition, is I wear clothes that represent who I am and my heritage. And I think that helps to raise that awareness, to increase pride in our history. Sometimes we're not able to share our history, but sometimes wearing the clothes will make people want to know a little bit more about you. And so that is
it's
one
another
of the
form
things
of
that
evangelization.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
I agree with
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
And the music. I would say one of the churches in Albuquerque, Mexico, one of the things they do is every time they play an African American spiritual, since there are no royalties given to African Americans for their contribution to worship music, they raise funds every time they use one of those songs, and they send it on to New Hope UCC, our only African American congregation within our conference. So those are ways in which we're trying to create that awareness and not only talk about it, but also be about it.
Yeah, I'm finding that I learn so much as I work and communicate with you, Father Andrew, but also crossing denominational lines. And we had a wonderful experience where Dr. Warren, you did a great job in challenging me, and I appreciate that. And the one thing that this was, I'm speaking of an event that we had on mental health ministry, and there wasn't a panel member represented from the African American community. And that was one of those shame on me's, because I really did need to focus on that myself. Having been in California and working with the African American community up and down the state of California as a bishop, I was trying my very best to try to listen. So the concept was listening. Well, I can listen a lot, but until I put something into practice, that's a whole other issue. But having said that, I really do believe in the power of listening, and that the more we listen, the better we will be especially in the white Anglo community. That often I have my understanding of what, say, racism might be, specifically white and black relational racism. But I don't really have a clue. I mean, the best I can do is say the river runs deep in the African American culture that I don't fully grasp. And so the only thing I can do is listen. And that was one thing that we had to do as bishops in the state of California. We had 12 bishops in California, and we just had to stop and listen to leaders within the African American community. Maybe you can speak to that. Do you see that there's a little bit of tension where people might think that they know what racism is?
Well, I would say first that it begins with listening. That if we don't sit down at the table as
Right.
we're doing right now and listen to one another's story, we can't make it any further. We can't move forward. So listening then produces relationships like you and I now have, and hopefully I'll have with you two. But I think that it's important to listen and then really be able to articulate that you understand where that individual is coming from
Right.
or their experiences. So in telling you about racism, it's from different perspectives. We all could probably tell you different stories, and you may not have even thought of it in that vein. We think of racism from a very broad perspective, but there are times where racism is in place almost 24/7 in my life. You know, when I get into my car,
Yes, ma'am.
I know
Yes.
that I can be stopped at any time. It doesn't matter whether I'm male or female. You know, just the color of my skin puts me in jeopardy. And so I have to always check myself and always pray that, you know, there will not be any bad encounters that would cause problems for me or my family. I don't have family here, but, you know, I worry about my 2 sons that I have, you know, and what will happen to them when they leave the house. So racism affects people differently.
I've often thought, you know, just going through the regarding immigration, even as we in California, we had different stop places. It was beyond border checking, so it was within the. But what I noticed was just, and I'm a white guy, and going through the second border check, that was just a very fascinating thing for me because there's a little tension. And I could only imagine what, say, a person with brown skin would feel, and it's just a different tension. And I think in some ways it's kind of like a microaggression, that people tend to feel on a regular basis. And so I think I hear a little bit of what you're saying. But what would you say? What could we do within our denominations to enhance that level of listening? What can we do with each other in our own community?
Listen and learn, spend more time with one another. But hear the stories of people of color, and particularly African Americans.
Right.
I contend that systemic racism injures and kills more people of color daily than all of the major diseases combined and violent crime, because it's so ingrained in the system, in the healthcare system, in the education system, in economic development, in the environment, even in faith. It's just ingrained, and a person who is not a person of color, who is not black, may not even understand what we go through daily, simply every time we get up and go to the store, as leave our homes, drive in our cars, that there's a whole system of historic racism that comes into play instantly when we walk into many rooms.
Yes. There was a wonderful commercial by Procter & Gamble, and it was called The Look. It was really very impressive. You can go on YouTube and see it. But it's just fascinating. This African-American gentleman is in a pool, and somebody's looking, and they decide not to go in the pool, or that's his perception, and it's just very fascinating. But the whole thing, and then he's at a restaurant, and somebody just decides to take another table, two tables away.
Sure.
All these little things, and then it has this fascinating thing where the doors are open in a courtroom, and there's the bailiff, and so you're only looking at it from the from the man's eyes, the African American's eyes, and he walks in, and then the bailiff opens the door, and then they pan the room, and the next thing you know, that man is the judge. But it's really a very powerful thing, and no words, but very, very powerful.
Sure.
But I think, to your point, I think it different rooms
Yes.
You know, somebody comes into a different room, or you go into a different room, and people are just going to have a different reaction. And it may not be an aggressive reaction, but it is, or a macro
Yes.
aggression, but it might be a micro aggression. Yeah. Or as one said, it's like little mosquito bites. It's just always there. Fascinating. What would you say to this?
I think the key word is systemic, that it
Uh-huh.
affects everything in our society.
Everything.
And if I could share something, and I worry for my African brothers and sisters that come to this country. I had a seminarian call me from Nigeria. And I didn't know him. He called me out of the blue. He had heard about me. He says, I can't understand all this harassment in so many different places. And I says, brother, it's called being black in America.
Yeah. Right.
He didn't understand that. He didn't get that.
Yeah, you don't get
And
that
many
in
of the
Africa.
Africans that come here, you know, it really is an eye-opener for them. They can't, what's going on here?
Right.
And then, you know, I explained to him, I says, our history, in that everything in our country is about race. And you can't understand it outside of that prism.
Yeah.
So, you know, helping, I think, our African brothers and sisters to understand what is happening here, not just what has happened, but what is happening on a daily basis. You're treated differently 24/7.
Yeah.
And racism speaks to having power. I can share
Yes.
with you a story where I was riding in the car with two of my white colleagues, and we got stopped because the car had not been registered. And we were nowhere near Phoenix. And so I was concerned that maybe we're going to have to find some other mode of transportation to get back home because they're going to take the car. I was sitting in the back, and they were sitting in the front, and the officer said, you don't have registration. And he could have easily said, I have to take your car. But because they were white, he said, I'm not going to give you a ticket, but make sure you get this car registered. And I explained to them, had that been me driving,
You wouldn't have a car.
Right.
we
No,
would
you
not
wouldn't.
have a car right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate this. This really within this month of Black History Month. I was going to say Black Catholic History Month. We actually had that, and I keep forgetting if it's September or October.
November.
I got it wrong on both points. But I appreciate it. And this is, as I said, a seat at the table, but this isn't the end, right? So I'm hoping that we will be able to, before camera or after, behind camera, continue this relationship. It's important to me here in the Diocese of Phoenix, and I believe it's important to us as Christians and people of goodwill. It's just, especially here in Phoenix. We shouldn't be standing alone. We need to walk together.
That's right.
Amen.
Thank you. So with that, I thank you all for being a part of this wonderful experience, and hope and pray that you'll be able to join us again next month at a seat at the table. Thank you.